Hey class, it's Mr. Dow. Just wanted to have a brief discussion with you about the story assigned to the class this week, How I Met My Husband by Alice Munro. Um, you will have another story assignment, by the way. You've been put into groups, and each group has its own separate story to work with. And that story is the one which you will be writing about in your first paper assignment. But while this is going on, I'm still going to assign some stories to the entire class because there are some concepts I want to cover that the whole class needs to be aware of. So this week's story, How I Met My Husband, is one where small details actually tell us a ton of information that we need. And this goes back to the idea of being an active reader as opposed to a passive reader. Keep in mind, the author of this story, of any story, starts at ground zero. We don't know who the characters are. We don't know the situation. We don't know the conflict. And worse than that, we don't care about any of that stuff either. So the author has to give us all that information and somehow get us to care about this story and about the characters in it as soon as possible. If it takes 5 or 6 pages, I'm too bored. I'm not going to keep reading. But if they do it right, if they're a smart author, a good author, the way Alice Munro is, I will learn stuff and care about what's going on very quickly, which is what happens in this story. So to kind of establish that or talk about how that happened, I want to look at 5 details, small details, from the very first 2 pages of How I Met My Husband, and just talk about why they're important, why they're there. Detail number 1. Very quickly, I learned that this entire story is told as a memory. The older Edie is remembering something that happened to her when she was younger. I know the first event in the story is the plane lands in the field and all the people are excited to go see it. But then she lets me know that this happened to her in her youth. Doing that kind of tells me right away that whatever goes on in the story, Edie's going to survive it. This is something important that happened to her, but I don't get the sense that she's in any real danger during this story. And that kind of sets a tone for the story. The second detail I think is really important is the way that Edie interacts with Loretta Bird. This happens on the very first page of the story, and Loretta Bird is not an important character at all. I think the only reason she's there and so early is so I can start learning about Edie without the author telling me who Edie is and what she's like. And what I learn is right away, Edie's kind of judgmental. Edie does not like Loretta Bird. She doesn't say that, but I can tell by her attitude that she does not approve of Loretta Bird. Now Edie's younger, Loretta's older, so if it was just left at that, I would think, Edie, you're being overly judgmental. But we learned she's 15. What 15-year-old is not judgmental? And as we read a little bit about this, realize, her judgment is right about Loretta Bird. She's pretty sharp in her observations. And at the end, towards the end of that little sequence, Loretta Bird is asking her, or tries to ask her, questions that are completely inappropriate about her employers, the Peebles. And Edie, even though she's only 15, and she's essentially a child dealing with an adult, she's able to handle that situation, giving away no information that would be inappropriate, and at the same time not openly arguing with the adult. Now this is small. These are not giant, huge, earth-shattering events, but right away from that very first section, I get the sense, you know what? Edie's kind of smart in dealing with people, and she is a good judge of character. And this gets reinforced, like even her judgment of Mrs. Peebles in the beginning when Mrs. Peebles was making these comments about country people and country bumpkins. Edie understands, she didn't mean to insult me. That's just the way she talks. Again, good judgment. I'm learning that more than once about Edie in the beginning. The third detail I would focus on or point out is the one where Edie talks about how she did in school when she was at her own home. She admits she got the lowest score of anybody in that high school. Now, if people are not reading this story actively, if they're reading it passively and just kind of zipping through it, I think that detail sticks out to them, and they tend to think, Edie, stupid country girl, which is totally wrong. I think what you should get from that detail is that first, Edie is honest. She doesn't try to hide that. She just says it straight out. The older Edie explains the situation to us and says, look, it's just she didn't respond well to the way school was taught at that time. I've already got other information about Edie from seeing her deal with these adults. And keeping in mind, she's a young girl who's employed by the Peebles, more adults, and dealing with their neighbors. So she's in a very sort of like socially particular situation, and she's able to navigate it pretty well. I think Edie is fairly smart, and she shows that throughout this, but she's also, in this sense, she's an honest person. Detail number 4, I think is that I would take that detail when she is talking about the things she appreciates that the Peebles have, which she did not have in the home where she grew up, which is apparently very, very rural. And she talks about taking a bath and how wonderful a hot bath is to her, a very new experience. And the detail I think is most important is that she says she only took one bath a week like that because to do it more often would make it less special to her and would seem like too much, like taking too much. And I think that's an important detail to help me, and it helps me like Dee Dee a lot. I think a lot of people in that situation, being given the chance to then take baths if they haven't done it before, hot baths, would take a lot of them. Would take 3 a day, or at least 1 a day. Whereas Edie's got a sense of appreciation about this, no sense of entitlement at all. And really all the other things she says in that paragraph, which none of which are important to the plot, they all tend to paint a portrait of a person who is kind of, a person who appreciates things, who appreciates details, thinks about her life. Again, she's not sophisticated and she's not necessarily book smart, but a person who is thinking about life a lot. And that's important. And that ties into the detail number 5, which most people would pick up on this as an important detail. When Edie tries on Mrs. Peoples' dress, it adds a shading of psychology that was not there in the first 2 pages. First couple pages, I'm getting a sense that, okay, this is a careful, sort of thoughtful country girl, inexperienced in life, understands the situation she's in, is pretty good at dealing with these adults in the situation. But I do get the sense that she's shy or keeps to herself. And when she tries on the dress, that adds another element to this. Now, notice I think she is kind of breaking a rule here. She's doing something she probably shouldn't do. But at the same time, she's not doing it recklessly. I get the sense that Edie is doing it carefully. She's not going to ruin the dress. She's not going to go overboard here and start drinking the liquor. Her interest here is to see, what do I look like in grown-up clothes as a grown-up, which for a 15-year-old girl, particularly this time period, is completely normal. It's a completely normal, even a healthy thing. This tells me Edie, curious about life. She's not a passive person. Because if I didn't have this scene, I would tend to think, well, yeah, she's kind of passive. Who wouldn't be? You're 15. You're away from home for the first time, working for people you don't really know. Being passive or being careful about the way you act is natural and normal. But Edie shows here that there's more going on with her than that she is curious about life. She's a person who's going to be an active participant in her own life, which is crucial to this story, which is it's part of the reason she gets into the conflict at all. I think a much more shy girl would not get mixed up with a guy like Chris, nor would a much more shy girl end up doing what Edie does at the end of the story, which is something that most adults struggle with. Edie decides to let go. She decides, I'm not going to wait for this guy anymore in my life. I need to live my own life. Therefore, I'm just going to stop worrying about this guy. Good on you, Edie. But a lot of the stuff that's important that Edie does here is established in small details in the first couple of pages. And so, again, I always recommend be an active reader. It helps if you have a pen in hand, if you're taking notes in the margins and thinking about the details that the author chose to give you, even in the opening couple of pages where it doesn't seem like much is happening. A lot is happening, all right? So that's just a few details, just some stuff to think about. And that's I think, ultimately this is an enjoyable story because of the careful selection of details that Alice Munro has presented to us. Anyway, okay, you have other stories to read. Hopefully this helped you a little bit. Let me know if you have questions. Keep going.